Hi everyone. I'm just going to go over some of the very basics of MLA formatting, or rather MLA in-text citations and works cited page entries. The most important things to remember are, first of all, you need an in-text citation and a works cited entry for every piece of information in your paper. It doesn't matter if it's something you already know from high school. If it's not something that an average 10-year-old would know, if you went up to him or her on the street and asked, you have to have a source for it. So if it's something that you already knew, you have to go out and find a source that says that. The type of things that don't need citations are very common knowledge, such as there are 50 states in the United States. George Washington was the first president of the United States. There are 12 inches in a foot. The Earth is the third planet from the sun. William Shakespeare wrote many plays. It's something that is that common. If you have knowledge that is that common, you don't need a citation for it. Anything else, yes, you have to have an in-text citation for the information, and you have to cite a source for it on the works cited page. Another important thing to remember is that you don't have to cite sources in your introduction, your conclusion, or transition paragraphs if you discuss that information elsewhere in the paper and cite a source there. If you state something in any of those paragraphs that you don't cite a source for elsewhere in the paper, then yes, you have to have a citation there too. So in-text citations do not carry over from one paragraph to another. If you have a paragraph in which you cite Smith, and then the information in the next paragraph is from the same source, you have to have a whole new citation in that paragraph. Now, if you put those 2 points together, that means that virtually every paragraph except your introduction, your conclusion, and an occasional transition paragraph must have at least one in-text citation in it. Because, of course, you already know that information that you summarize and paraphrase has to have an in-text citation. It's not just direct quotes that need in-text citations. Okay, with that in mind, let's look at how things are set up on the Purdue OWL. Now, the reason that I am working with the Purdue OWL as opposed to your textbook, which is just as reliable, is that you probably won't be keeping your textbook for the rest of your life. You probably won't keep your textbook past the end of this semester, and I don't particularly blame you. Also, MLA updates its style every few years. So after a while, your textbook might not be accurate. What's listed on the Purdue OWL always is accurate. Now, there are other sources you can use too, and it's not necessarily that Purdue is the only one that is correct. But Purdue has so many things on it that if you start working with the Purdue OWL, you'll find that it can help you write all kinds of things throughout your entire life. In addition, you should know that the Purdue OWL also covers APA and the Chicago Manual of Style, because some disciplines prefer those. I'm sorry, did I say APA and Chicago Manual? I think so, that's what I meant. Some disciplines prefer APA or Chicago Manual of Style instead of MLA. Once you know how to look things up, you know how to do citations. The different styles do things in different ways, but what you mainly need to learn how to do is how to look it up. Nobody in their right mind is going to ask you to memorize any of this stuff. I've been teaching MLA since 1996, and I started using it in 1991, and I still have to look up how to do works cited entries for most things. Okay, so this is the introductory page on MLA formatting and style on the Purdue OWL, and there's a link to this page on the Week 7 assignment list. I recommend that you bookmark this page because you're going to want to use it not just in this class, but in a lot of classes that you will be working with. Now, as it says, it might be a good idea to watch the MLA videos on the MLA vidcast series on the Purdue OWL YouTube channel. Okay. And also, of course, there's information in your textbook. And I have posted the MLA PowerPoint for you to look at on this week's assignment sheet. There are videos all over YouTube that explain it as well. Use anything and everything you have to figure out how to do this correctly. Okay. Some professors are very, 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 very nitpicky about this stuff. I am on the Writing Center committee, and at a committee meeting, I once heard about a professor in another discipline who takes off a point for every character in a bibliography entry that isn't formatted correctly. That means that a good paper could end up with a negative score if the student formats one entry completely wrong. I wouldn't do anything close to that in any class, but you do need to be aware that there are professors out there who are very, 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 very nitpicky about this stuff. So you need to learn how to look it up and how to do it correctly. Also, do not use any of the computerized engines that have been created to put together a bibliography or do in-text citations, and don't rely on the way that something is cited on an article on the database. Those engines can provide you with some good information and a good place to start, but I have never found any of those that will give you a correct MLA citation. If I did, I'd just have everybody use it, and I'd always use it myself, and then we wouldn't have to worry about this stuff. But so far, I have yet to find any engine that will put these together correctly, and the one in Microsoft Word doesn't know the first thing about MLA. And I can tell, usually, if you have used an engine to put together your works cited page entries and so forth. And I'd much rather that you try to do it yourself and make some mistakes than to use search engines that I'm telling you right now aren't going to give you the correct way to do it. Don't use them. If I do think you've used one, I will take off additional points for it. Okay? Okay, so let's take a look at what MLA offers us. Or rather, what Purdue OWL offers us. On this page, on the left, there is a drop-down menu. And the best thing to do when you're working on citing information in a paper is to go to the page that specifically discusses the type of source you're working with. Now, this first page goes over paper formatting, which I have already provided for you in a video, but you can review it if you like. It talks about using section headings, which I don't think you'll need for any paper in this class, but you might need eventually. And it tells you how to cite the Purdue OWL if you ever need to. Okay. You definitely will want to look at in Text Citations the Basics. The basic rule comes down to this. Generally speaking, an in-text citation uses the author's last name and the page number. Now, if there aren't any page numbers, and sometimes there aren't. If you're citing a documentary, for example, obviously there are no page numbers in a video. If you have downloaded an article through ProQuest and you didn't download it as a PDF, you don't have page numbers. If you don't have page numbers, you don't have page numbers. Some professors will want you to include information on the paragraph number that something comes from. I don't. If you take your paper to the Writing Center and they tell you to include the paragraph numbers, and some of them might, just nod and smile. But for my class, you don't need to have paragraph numbers. We are learning strict gospel, if that's what you want to call it, MLA style in this class, and that's what we're using. Okay, so make sure that you review this page on MLA in-text citations, the basics, because there are two ways to do them using the author page style. One way is to put the author's name in the text of the paper where you start using information from that source, and just say Wordsworth states, should be states, not stated, and then the information, and then at the end of the information that comes from that source, put the page number in parentheses. In a way, that's the best way to do it. It's not that one is technically more correct than the other. It's just that if you put the author's name at the beginning of the information that comes from that source and the page numbers at the end, that does a good job of identifying for the reader exactly what information came from that source. The other way that you can do it is to just put at the end of the source the author's name and the page number, and notice that there's no comma in between it, and that goes in parentheses, and the period for the sentence before it comes after the parentheses. There are different ways to do this. If you have an author that you know, a corporate author, if there is no author, then you use whatever appears first in the Works Cited entry. And generally speaking, it is better to put together your Works Cited page before you format your in-text citations, because that will give you the information that you need in order to know what to put in the in-text citation. In general, if you don't have an author, the first thing that is on the Works Cited entry will be a title. And if it's the title of a shorter work, which would be, for example, a short story, a poem, a song, the name of an episode from a TV series, that's all I can think of right offhand. Those go in quotation marks. Oh, article titles go in quotation marks. Longer works, such as books, the names of magazines, the names of journals, the name of a book that you found a poem in, the title of a movie or a documentary, the title of a CD or an album that a song comes from, the title of a newspaper, the title of a documentary or a video or a movie, the title of a television series as opposed to a specific episode. Those are italicized. Okay? Think of it this way. They started off with italics for the big stuff, and then they had to have a way to format the little things that are like inside the work that's already italicized. Like a magazine name, like Time Magazine, Time is in italics. Well, now they have to have a way to format the names of the articles that are inside that magazine. So they use quotation marks for that. That's one way to think of it. Okay. If you have authors with the same, if you have two sources with the same last name, you have to include the first initial of the author to differentiate between them. Okay. There are a number of different things, but this is one that's somewhat important. Let's say that you read an article, in this case by a man named Weisman. And in this article that's written by Weisman, he gives information that he got from a source named Ravitch. Now, you didn't read the article by Ravitch. You read what Ravitch said in an article that was written by Weisman. So you're not going to cite Ravitch on your Works Cited page because you didn't actually read that article. The citation you're going to have on the Works Cited page will refer to Weisman. That's what they mean by an indirect source. And the way you do that is remembering that you didn't read the Ravitch article. You would use Ravitch's name in the paragraph. And then for your in-text citation, you'd put QTD period in and the name of the author of the source you did read and the page number from the source you read. Use QTD period regardless of whether the information is a summary, a paraphrase, or a quote. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have used a direct quote in the example because that could be confusing. Okay? You always in MLA use QTD period in regardless of whether it's a summary, a paraphrase, or a quote that the citation is associated with. And then it talks about how to do miscellaneous non-print sources and electronic sources, how to do the in-text citations for those. And you can read or study this page yourself, and I do encourage you to because it's relatively, it's fairly important to know how to do that. Okay. Now, I've written a lot of papers in MLA and APA over the course of my life, and I have never once needed an endnote or a footnote. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. However, you will want to look at the page on basic format for the Works Cited page. It gives you the rules about starting the Works Cited page on a separate page, how to title it. You put the words Works Cited, and just like the title of the paper, you capitalize the W and you capitalize the C, but you don't italicize it, bold it, put it in quotation marks, put it in a larger font, underline it, put dancing clowns or flashing lights around it. You just type it in the center of the page with the words work and the word cited both capitalized. I noticed that it's cited with a C. Cited with an S has a different meaning, okay? And then how you format each individual entry is going to depend on the type of source it is, and we'll take a look at how to look that up in just a couple of moments. Okay. Works cited entries use hanging indents. It's exactly the opposite of the paragraphs in your paper. The first line is flush left against the left margin, and every subsequent line of that entry is indented ½ an inch. And I'm going to show you how to do that using Microsoft Word. Okay. The way we would start off, of course, and I told you that there's a good reason to use your ruler, and this is basically what to use the ruler for indentations, and this is the main one. Okay. We would begin our works cited page on a new page. We would center the text, just like we did the title of our paper. Make sure that we are in Times New Roman, 12 point, and that we have our ruler up. And we would type works cited. We would hit the return key one time, and then we would choose to have our text aligned left. Now, in order to set up your works cited entries, make sure that both, remember when we talked about formatting your paper, that there are two arrows on the ruler. Make sure that both the arrow pointing down and the arrow pointing up are flush against the left margin. Then hold down the Shift key, point to the bottom arrow that points up, and drag it to the ½ inch mark on the ruler. Your cursor will stay flush against the left margin, and you want it to. But let's say, and I'm just going to make some entries up right off the top of my head. Let's say that we are using a chapter in a book, and here are our authors' names. The first author's name is last name first. So let's say that the first author listed on the cover of the book is John White. And the second author listed on the cover of the book is Andrew Zabel. And the third author listed on the title of the book is Catherine Jones. Oh, do you notice what I did? I forgot to double space my page when I started. Bad English teacher, bad English teacher. Okay. So we have our authors' names. The first one has last name first, then the first name, and the rest of them are in the order in which names go, first name, then last. Always list your authors in exactly the same way that they are listed on the title page of a book or at the top of an article. Don't change the way that they're listed. Don't change the order they're listed in. I honestly have known professors to get into physical fights over whose name is listed first on a book or on an article. It's that important to them. Okay. At the end of our author's name, we would have a period. Then we would have one space. Now, if we are using a chapter from a book and the chapter has a specific title, we would put that title in quotes. And let's say the title of this chapter is The name of the chapter is 15 Situations in Which the Sky Might Not Be Blue. We would have open quotation marks. We would type the title of the chapter, capitalizing all of the important words, which is pretty much everything except prepositions. At the end of the title, we have a period, close quotation marks, and a space. Then we would have the title of our book, which would be italicized. The title of the book is The Sky is Blue. We turn off our italics for our period. Have a space. The next thing we would have, and we would take this off of the title page of the book, is the city of publication. And sometimes there's more than one city listed. If there's more than one city listed, use the first city that's listed, because what that tells you is that the copy of the book that you have in your hand was actually printed and published in that city. So if the title page of the book says New York, Boston, London, Paris, Munich, use New York. Okay? Then we have a colon. Then we have the name of the publisher. Let's say it's Macmillan. And then we have a comma. And then we have the year of publication, which is taken from, if you look at the title page of the book and you turn the page, on the very back there's usually a page of a lot of small print. And you will find a C in a circle for copyright, and there will be a year after that. That's where you get the year of publication. And since we read this, a print copy of this book, we then put the word print, period. Then we hit the return key. Notice that if we use the ruler to set up our Works Cited page, Microsoft Word will automatically take care of the indenting for us. And there's an important reason for this. Let's say that in revising, I noticed that, oh, gee, Andrew Zabel includes his middle name. That must be important. I have to add that. And let's say his middle name is now you see how everything shifts because I added that extra word? If you had done this by hand instead of using the ruler, what you would have would be a mess. Because your indentations would be, I'm not even going to show you what it would look like. It's just horrible. And then you have to go in and fix that all by hand. If you use the ruler, Microsoft Word actually does something right, and it takes care of this for you. Okay? So that's why you need to learn to work with the ruler in Microsoft Word. Okay, now I'm just going to, actually, to show you what I'm going to show you, I can use rather than waste your time, I can copy and paste this and just change the last name of our first author. Change it to Anderson here, and let's change it to Smith here. Your Works Cited entries have to be alphabetized. So, an easy way to do that is after you have listed all your entries, you simply highlight all of them. And then on Microsoft Word, depending on the version you're using, under the paragraph section, you should see an icon that has a red A at the top, a blue Z at the bottom, and a down arrow. If you click that, it will open this dialog box, and you want it to sort by paragraphs, and you want it to sort by text, and you want it to be ascending, which generally is the default. Check to make sure that it is, and click OK. And your Works Cited entry page will be alphabetized for you. Notice that you don't skip extra lines between entries. You don't number them. You simply type them and alphabetize them. One thing you do have to do by hand is if you have a work that doesn't have an author, and the title of the work begins with a, an, or the, it's not alphabetized by a, an, or the. It's alphabetized by the first important word. Okay? So, let's say that I had an entry for a chapter in a book, and the title of the book, the title of the chapter is and then let's say the title of the book is when I use Microsoft Word to alphabetize this, it's alphabetized under the quotation mark at the top. That's not where you want it, and you don't want it under T for the. You want it under M for men. So that one you would have to cut and paste where it goes. Okay. So when you don't have an author, you do have to do some manual alphabetizing, but generally Microsoft Word will do that for you. Okay, so this page will go through the basic rules on how to set up your Works Cited page and how to work with it if you have two works by the same author or a work with no author. And then after that, you look at your source and ask yourself, what kind of a source is this? And if you say, well, it's a book, then you just click here for Works Cited page books. And this page will give you the information on how to cite a book. And there's different ways depending on whether it has one author, more than one author, two or more books by the same author, corporate authors, books with no author, translated books, republished books, edition of a book, all of that. Okay. One thing I want to point out, you remember how when we did the initial research source form, and we talked about how one book might have different chapters by different people. And those books are called an anthology. And each chapter, if the chapters have a different author, has a separate citation. How you format that is described right here as a work in an anthology, reference, or collection. You have the last name of the person who wrote the chapter, the first name of the person who wrote the chapter, the title of the chapter in quotation marks, the title of the book you took it from in italics, then you have ED period, and you have the name of the editor, and if there's more than one, you list all of them. Then you have the city of publication, a colon, the publisher, a comma, the year, the page numbers, and if you used a book, this would be print. And then they give you some examples. Okay. I think that's the most important one of these to point out, other than just to look at it in general. That's how you do a book. And if you're using a print newspaper, magazine, or journal, that's a periodical. There are electronic sources, okay, which would be web publications, and it tells you exactly how to do all the different kinds of websites that you have. The one that you will use for the articles that you get, that you download from the library, which is what you should be using as far as articles go, as far as electronic sources go, is an article from an online database. Okay? And it tells you exactly how to do it, and it gives you examples. Okay? Notice that what you have is the name of the authors of, let's use this as a journal, the name of the author, last name first, and if there's more than one, that's last name first, and then the rest of them had the first name first. The title of the article in quotation marks, the title of the journal that it was published in. This is the volume number of the journal. There's a dot, then there's the issue number of the journal, then there's the year that the journal was published in, then a colon, then the page number from the journal, and then you have the name of the database that you downloaded it from. And the name of the database is italicized. Okay. And you have a period, then you have the word web, a period, and this is the date that you downloaded the article. And notice that the day goes first, then the abbreviation for the month, then the year, and a period. Okay. Okay. Then there are other common sources, and this is where you will find things like a personal interview, speeches or lectures, if you get information from there. If you refer to a painting, you have to cite the painting. Films and movies, and recorded films or movies, which includes things like DVDs. And it tells you that if you watched the movie, you use the word film at the end. And if you watched the DVD, this is if you watched it in the theater. Okay? If you watched it on a DVD, you put DVD at the end. Okay? TV shows, TV episodes that you got off of a DVD, sound recordings, digital files like PDFs. Okay? That's other common sources. I'm just showing you where to find this stuff, because all you have to do is look it up. They'll give you an example and follow the example exactly. Put commas where they put commas, put periods where they put periods, use italics where they use italics, put dates the way that they put dates, copy the format exactly. That's all there is to it. Identify what type of source you're working with, look up how to do it on the Purdue OWL, and copy it exactly. It's really not that hard. But people do all kinds of things wrong, and I really don't know why. The only time that it's tricky is if you have to combine different types of entries. Like if you have a second edition of an anthology. You might wonder whether you put second edition before the editor's name or after the editor's name. And if you run into a situation like that, email me and I'll help you work it out. Okay. There's really nothing that difficult about it, but people have a lot of problems with it, and I think, personally, it's because I think they don't want to bother to look it up. I think they don't want to take a couple of minutes to look up how to do something and then just copy the format, because copying something isn't that tough, and I know that students can do it, and they screw it up all the time, mainly because I think they're too lazy to look it up. And you know I don't like laziness. So that's all you need to do MLA correctly. Okay. I can't think of anything else offhand that I need to tell you. Look over the MLA sections so that you have some idea of where to find, for example, how to cite a personal interview. And then just figure out what kind of source you have in your hand or on your computer screen, and find how to do that kind of entry, and they're all listed on one of these pages. And copy it. That's all there is to it. Make sure that you do study how to do the in-text citations, because that information is kind of important. All of this is also repeated in your textbook, and I've provided the page numbers in the textbook for you. And I also have given you an MLA PowerPoint from the Purdue OWL that goes through and explains this to you too. I really don't think you need much more explanation than that. Just look the stuff up on the Purdue OWL and copy the format they use exactly the way they use it. Don't add anything extra. Don't change anything. Don't go by what is written at the bottom as the citation on the article, because that might be wrong. If you're citing something from a journal and you're using VOL period, ISS period, that's wrong. That's not the way it's done. And I know that, and yes, you will lose points for it because I'm telling you to look it up, so look it up. And if you look up how to cite something from a journal, which is a type of a periodical, come to an article in a scholarly journal, it shows you volume, period, issue, and then in the example, it shows you 15.1. 15 is the volume number, the issue number is 1, and it doesn't say VOL period or ISS period there. It's just the numbers. So if you have VOL period and ISS period, I'll know you didn't look it up. And if you didn't look it up, it's because you're lazy. And I don't like laziness. So yeah, you'll lose some points for it. Okay? So that's pretty much all I'm going to tell you about MLA citations. The Writing Center definitely can help you with this. They're real experts on it. And of course, if you have any questions, all you have to do is send me an email. And you know, you send it to deborah.oakey@csn.edu. And of course, you know and could probably tell anybody that you run into that you have to email me from an account other than Canvas. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope it helps you. Do get in touch with me if you need any help.